What is important in our society? Law and order? Safety? Money or the economy? Education maybe? Or even perhaps peace? I think you may all think that this is a good list. Well, at least most of you. What about our children? What could be more important than our future generations? And from the first list, who needs this the most? Law, order, money, education and peace. I think it is safe to say that it is our children. Who in society is at most risk? Who are the most vulnerable? Who are the most easily influenced? Again, I think it's easy to say, it is our children. So what is power, and what does it look like? And it's important to understand this. Looking at a crude structure, we have, right at the top, emperors, kings, queens, princes and other royals. Then we have people like bankers, judges, and other people within the law at high levels. How about generals and leading army types, prime ministers, presidents, and high-ranking politicians? The law itself, police officers and secret services, and others behind the scenes, teachers and doctors, and of course, let us not forget religion. Then comes management. I am sure many of you have seen or experienced this wielding of power within the workplace. So, a rough look at the power structure of society. But who is missing from this? And who are the most powerless? You guessed it. It is our children. It is important to have an understanding of power and what it is. To understand the mind of the powerful. The higher the power, the more difference you usually find the powerful are to, say, you or I. Keeping this really simple, most dictators probably do not know how to use a washing machine. Most kings can probably not make an egg sandwich. And most emperors are probably not very good at cleaning. I think you get the picture. Add to this that most people of power have other people around them, usually trying to sustain or increase their own power, telling them what they want to hear and how wonderful they are. Years, and in some cases lifetimes of this behaviour around you would give you a false grip on reality. This being the case, it can only be said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Thank you, Lord Acton, for writing this. So, this being the case, we now understand that children are the most at risk within any society, and thus we should spend most of our time, money, and care protecting them. And in cases of any form of mistreatment to our most innocent, fragile, and precious members of our society, we should act fast, hard, and show little mercy. Well, that is what most of you think should or is going on, but I'm afraid it is far from the truth. This film is about our silence. I say our silence because it seems to me that we all know about this in some form or another. It could be that you have had some experience of this, know someone who has, or at least seen the headlines, heard rumours, or had an inner strange feeling about this subject. Our silence and our inability to take any action are actually fueling this horrific dark world. It is time to now take action. This can be as simple as watching and sharing films like this, and there are many. Start the conversation on social media, and most importantly, vote with your feet. Our silence has to stop. Children do not have a voice, and we must be their voice. Remember, we are dealing in many cases with the most powerful within our society, and if not the most powerful, they at least will hold some form of power over their victims. You may feel that there is little you can do, but if enough of us speak out and vote with our feet, it can change. Pedophilia is a psychiatric disorder in which an adult or older adolescent experiences a primary or exclusive sexual attraction to prepubescent children. Although girls typically begin the process of puberty at age 10 or 11, and boys at age 11 or 12, criteria for paedophilia extend the cutoff point for prepubescence to age 13. A person must be at least 16 years old and at least 5 years older than the prepubescent child for the attraction to be diagnosed as paedophilia. the political elite. Now, the subject of the political elite applies to every country on the planet. We will, in the most part, focus on the UK to express this dark power. How many scandals can you recall in connection with children and the political elite? Since the 1960s, there has been a pretty constant feed of news stories, and may I remind you that our news outlets are heavily influenced, if not controlled, by the political elite. A term that is often used is underaged. You do know that this means children. The term softens the story and the accusation. Without going into too much detail, and this film would be 6 hours long if we did, there have been countless numbers of adult victims that have come forward and spoken out and accused people in power of such crimes. There have also been police officers, other politicians, social workers, and even members of the armed forces that have tried to blow the whistle, come forward, tell the truth. All of the above have often been silenced, brushed aside, discredited, and in some cases wrongly accused of crimes and accused of some form of mental health. Now, do not take my word for this. Take a look, do a search on the internet, see for yourself. Let us, for argument's sake, say that there is a percentage of these victims or others who are not telling the truth and are outright liars, and the percentage is up to you to decide. It surely cannot be the case that 100% of them are all lying and are some form of disgruntled, aggrieved, resentful, disaffected, aggravated, media-seeking, money-grabbing people. This, I'm afraid, is what history tells us. Do you smell a rat yet? And to add to this, how many of these accusers have turned out to be correct once the accused is dead? This truth after death seems to be a common theme that runs through this story. Protected until the grave, and in some cases beyond. Let us take a look at just a few people and places of interest. Cyril Smith, MBE, was a British Liberal Member of Parliament for Rochdale. After his death, numerous allegations of child sexual abuse by Smith emerged, leading the police to believe that Smith was a serial sex offender. Take a look into this fine specimen of a man, and you will clearly see that this was inconceivable, that people around him at all levels could not have known what he was up to. He was clearly protected. Sir Edward Richard George Heath, KGMBE, often known lovingly as Ted Heath, was a British politician who served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1970 to 1974. In April 2015, a rape claim against Heath was investigated by the Metropolitan Police, but was dropped. In August 2015, several police forces were investigating allegations of child sexual abuse by Heath. Hampshire, Jersey, Kent, Wiltshire, Gloucestershire and Thames Valley Constabularies and London's Metropolitan Police investigated such claims. It was reported that a man had claimed that at the age of 12 years he had been raped by Heath in a Mayfair flat in 1961 after he had run away from home. Take a look at Uncle Teddy and see what you come up with. Dolphin Square is an interesting place, a short walk from the halls of power in London, and a popular place to live for the elite. The square has long been home to MPs, spies, and other notables. It has been at the epicentre of a slew of scandals over the decades. In July 2015, the bright interior of a Dolphin Square flat was the setting for leaked tapes that appeared to show Lord Sewell snorting cocaine with 2 prostitutes. A string of other MPs have lived there, as well as businessmen and other powerful figures. Allegations of a paedophile ring involving senior military, law enforcement and political figures in the 1970s and 1980s have been investigated. The allegations included 3 murders. At one point, more than 100 MPs and lords rented flats in the square. There's a bleak certainty in British public life that whenever the words sex scandal, MPs, establishment and cover-up appear in pretty much any order, the name of this central London apartment block, Dolphin Square, follows soon afterwards. Leon Britton, Baron Britton of Spennythorn. In 1984, in his capacity as Home Secretary, Britton was handed a 40-page dossier by Geoffrey Dickens MP, which detailed alleged paedophile activity in the 1980s, including, according to Dickens, allegations concerning people in positions of power, influence, and responsibility. The whereabouts of the dossier are currently unknown. In October 2014, the Labour MP Jimmy Hood used parliamentary privilege to refer to claims that Britton had been linked to child abuse. After Britton died in January 2015, Watson accused him of multiple child rape. Greville Ewan Janner, Baron Janner of Braunston. Over the years, starting in 1991, specific allegations of sex abuse of children by Janner in the past, dating ultimately from at least 1955, were made to the authorities. This did not lead to any official action beyond Janner being questioned once, from the first allegations until 2015. After it was decided in 2015 that he should have been prosecuted earlier, the accusations were to be investigated in a trial of the facts. In April 2016, Janner was deemed to be too ill for a criminal trial, but he died before this could happen, though his allegations were included in a large inquiry into historical sexual abuse. After he was deemed to be too ill for a criminal trial, he continued to vote on issues in the House of Lords. Sir Peter Hugh Morrison was a British Conservative politician, MP for Chester from 1974 to 1992, and Parliamentary Private Secretary to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. MP Norman Tebbit recalled, "I began to hear allegations coming from his constituency when he was with me at the CCO that he was excessively interested in schoolboys. I faced him. He swore absolutely that there was no truth in it. I wasn't absolutely convinced." Tebbit did not discuss the rumours with Mrs. Thatcher, however, and she never raised them. In October 2012, Rod Richards, a former MP and ex-leader of the Welsh Conservatives, implicated Morrison in the North Wales child abuse scandal. Between 1974 and 1990, up to 650 children from 40 children's homes were sexually, physically, and emotionally abused. Richards said that Morrison and another high-profile Conservative politician were named in documents as regular and unexplained visitors to the care homes. Investigative journalist Nick Davies reports in The Guardian that Morrison received a caution for cottaging with underage boys in public lavatories. Former Conservative Minister Edwina Currie stated that Morrison regularly had sex with 16-year-old boys at a time when the legal age of consent for same-sex relations was 21. In 2002, Currie described Morrison as a notable pederast. In July 2014, Barry Strevens, a former bodyguard to Margaret Thatcher, claimed that he warned her that Morrison illegally held sex parties with underage boys. Despite his passing on the allegations to Thatcher, Morrison was promoted later to the position of Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. In January 2015, the Daily Telegraph reported allegations that Morrison raped a 14-year-old boy at Elm Guesthouse in London. The alleged victim said he was walking in the village of Harting in West Sussex in 1982 when Morrison gave him some money and later lured him to London. In 2019, Morrison was investigated by the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, with evidence from Eliza Manningham-Buller, former Director General of MI5, who had been friendly with Morrison for a time. Manningham-Buller said that she may have provided the Cabinet Secretary with information, including the comment that Morrison had a penchant for small boys. In February 2020, the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse claimed senior officials within the Conservative Party, including Thatcher, knew about allegations concerning Morrison for years but did not pass them on to the police. These are just a few of the many cases and accusations made by victims and survivors. Again, the pattern of post-life reveals their crimes. Protected. Protected, but why? Why would people around these predators protect them? Why would they not report, hide, and actually go out of their way to cover up and support them? I can only presume that they are involved, connected, and implicit in some way. Do not think for a moment that this is all behind us and a thing of the past. Remember, this information came out after their deaths. Thus, it is only logical to think that this is still going on, right now. Search and share your findings on social media. Talk about this. And do not stop talking about it. Stop our silence. Paedophile Information Exchange, or PI. It may shock many of you, as it did me, that this group even existed. The Paedophile Information Exchange was a British pro-paedophile activist group founded in October 1974 and officially disbanded in 1984. The group campaigned for the abolition of the age of consent. It was described by the BBC in 2007 as an international organisation of people who trade obscene material. The group's stated aim was to alleviate the suffering of many adults and children by campaigning to abolish the age of consent, thus legalising sex between adults and children. In March 2014, evidence emerged that PI had received grants totalling £70,000 from the Home Office, after a whistleblower told police he witnessed a successful 3-year grant renewal application for £35,000 in 1980, implying that a similar grant had been made in 1977. Just let that sink in. Taxpayer money was used to fund and support this group. In June 2015, documents emerged as a result of a BBC Freedom of Information request that revealed the then Conservative Home Secretary, Leon Britton, refused to support a bill designed to outlaw PI because he considered the law of incitement of sexual activities with children to be not so clear. On the 19th of July 2015, Australia's 60 Minutes broadcast an investigation of an alleged paedophile ring into which abused children were supplied by one of PI's founders, Peter Wrighton, who was also a former director of education in the National Institute for Social Work. The alleged network was said to include senior public figures such as Lord Janner and Sir Cyril Smith, alongside a former head of MI6, Sir Peter Telford Hayman. And talking about Sir Peter Telford Hayman, the former head of MI6, again, let that sink in, the head of MI6. In October 1978, Hayman left a package of paedophilia-related material on a London bus. The police traced the package back and discovered that Hayman, under the pseudonym Peter Henderson, had used an apartment in Bayswater, London, to conduct obscene correspondence. In the apartment, police found 45 diaries describing 6 years of sexual fantasies concerning children and activities with prostitutes, articles of female clothing, and obscene literature. He was investigated by police, but released without charge after being given a warning not to send obscene material through the post. In November 1980, Private Eye magazine revealed this event. In 1981, using parliamentary privilege, MP Geoffrey Dickens asked why Hayman had not been prosecuted, with Dickens saying, "How did such a potential blackmail risk come to hold highly sensitive posts at the MOD and NATO?" He also asked a leader of the House of Commons to investigate the security implications of diaries found in the diplomat's London flat, which contained accounts of sexual exploits. In 1981, the Attorney General, Sir Michael Havers, replied, "I am in agreement with the Director of Public Prosecutions, Sir Thomas Chalmers Hetherington QC, advice not to prosecute Sir Peter Hayman and the other persons with whom he had carried on an obscene correspondence, adding that, while Haman had been found to have received pornographic material through the post, it was not of an extreme nature, was non-commercial, and in a sealed envelope, so did not warrant prosecution. There was much debate and condemnation in the international press of these events. On the 29th of November 1985, Dickens complained in the House of Commons that he had suffered harassment following his naming of Haman. The noose around my neck grew tighter after I named a former high-flying British diplomat on the floor of the House. Honourable members will understand that where big money is involved, and as important names came into my possession, so the threats began. First, I received threatening telephone calls, followed by 2 burglaries at my London home. Then, more seriously, my name appeared on a multi-killers hit list. Protected, protected, protected. Just keep in mind that we are talking about our children, our most delicate, our most innocent, and the most in need of our protection. We have just scratched the surface of UK politics. This is, of course, going on throughout the world today. The House of God. The Catholic Church is by far not alone in this crime against society. It is, though, full of scandal. It can only be presumed that all other seats of God and corporations of religion are equally rampant with child abuse. It is, after all, a place of trust and power corrupts. The Catholic Church is an organised child abuse operation. There is no other way to see it but that. The number of cover-ups and the amount of denial is overwhelming, and yet it continues to operate without a scratch on its holy body. The relocation of priests to other churches and countries after any form of abuse is systematic, calculated, and very efficient. The thousands of victims have little to rejoice about, as they have had very little to nothing in the form of justice. And what justice can you give after sexually abusing a child and taking their innocence? It seems clear that this church attracts child predators, and the church in turn assists them in their crimes. Rape and grooming, with the silence and covering up over decades of the church, makes it a great place for paedophiles to operate. Their PR system kicks in every now and then, and words of change are always the headline. The problem is, they police themselves with zero outside influence, zero accountability, and are about as transparent as a lump of coal. Every time a survivor comes forward, there is always shock from the public and shock from the Vatican. With thousands and thousands of allegations, why is anyone shocked anymore? There is nothing to be shocked about at all. This is how Rome operates, and it is that simple. It is in their holy blood, and they gorge on the young. It is always said to be a handful of bad apple priests, but with so many cases over so many years, it would actually appear that the Vatican has orchards in every country on the planet. The number of examples is just too great to even get your head around. Nothing, and I mean nothing at all, has changed, and this international syndicate of child abusers and child rapists continues to operate. I honestly would rather leave my child alone with a drug dealer than a man of the cloth. There are just too many cases for anyone to think otherwise. They have had so many opportunities to make the change, and yet they have not. Because they do not want to. They have had 2,000 years to sort this out. The Catholic Church is an organised child abuse and child rape operation. It runs outside of conventional law and is full of power. And we all know what power can do. All roads lead to Rome. The first person most people think of within the world of celebrity and child abuse is Jimmy Savile, or his correct title, Jimmy Savile, OBE. Have you noticed that many of these child rapists are honoured in some way by the highest powers in the land? So, Savile was a radio DJ and TV celebrity for many years in the UK. A household name, to say the least. He was also a serial sex offender and child abuser. And you'll never guess what. During his lifetime, nothing about him again. Only after his death did the press jump on this story. The protection theme once again appears within this film. An interesting man with some amazing friends. These include the royal family of the UK, in particular Prince Charles, and an array of politicians and others. It was very clear to all around him during his lifetime what this man was up to. But once again, he was completely protected. Not only protected, but assisted. An interesting fact about Savile was that he was given the keys and partly put in charge of Broadmoor, the highest profile facility of its kind in the country, and the home to many of Britain's most notorious criminals. Again, let that sink in for a moment. A TV celebrity was put in a position of power in a prison hospital that housed the UK's most dangerous criminals. That in itself is crazy. But on top of this, he was a known child abuser. Of course, the allegations started flowing, and it was said that Savile abused several people under his charge. You could not make this up if you tried. Savile was a Tory supporter, friendly with Margaret Thatcher, and duly rewarded with a knighthood in 1990. The same year, Pope John Paul II awarded him a papal knighthood. Savile was made a Knight Commander of St. Gregory the Great by Pope John Paul II for his charity work. It is one of the highest awards the Pope can bestow. The world of celebrity is full of power, and power corrupts. The education system. Yet another sector of society that hides and of course protects child rapists is education. People put in power and trust. Their job is to educate our children and ready them for the world. Unfortunately, and again over decades, this has not always been the case. The horrific stories that come from this sector are as shocking as any you will hear. This is especially true of boarding schools. Again, the ongoing victim stories keep flooding out with little to no justice. We have covered high-rolling names within this film, but there is of course an army of individual lone wolves out there being forever deviant and striking at the innocent whenever they can. We have only opened the door a little way on all of this outrageous, insipid, dark world. We urge you to go through that door, research, and share it on your own social media. Saying nothing faced with this overwhelming evidence, I'm afraid, makes you complicit. Keep the conversations going and stop our silence.
Every victim witness who stepped forward in any way, or even was a potential witness that somebody heard about, has either been killed, put in jail under some theory or other, terrified or run out of the state, discredited. Every perpetrator, even the convicted ones, have been treated as conquering heroes. Obviously, the FBI was protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of old pedophiles having improper relations with little boys. They were protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of drug peddlers. They were protecting, in my opinion, they were protecting some very prominent politicians, some very powerful and wealthy individuals associated with those politicians and the political system, up to and including the highest political people in this entire country.